So last night I saw Supergirl, and man, this is the most disappointed I have been since on my 21st birthday my mother handed me an Xbox 360 shaped package, only to reveal that it was in fact a mattress warmer. I was actually really excited for this movie, and I was for like a couple of different reasons. And the first is obviously last year's Superman movie. If you told me at the beginning of last year that a superhero movie would be my favorite movie that came out that year, I would try and have you committed. But no, I love that movie despite not really liking Superman that much like ever, but I think that's kind of what was special about it. It made me understand Superman. It made me like retroactively give a shit about this character and get what people were talking about all those years about why, no, there is actually a lot to this character. There is some really interesting stuff going on here. And I would say Supergirl's like last 5 minute stinger was a part of why I was so interested in seeing this movie, because she's like this drunken girl mess, and I was like, okay, cool, that's interesting. Let's see where this is going. And I would say in terms of things that I liked about this movie, I thought the actor who plays Supergirl, Millie Alcock, is actually like pretty decent. I think she gives a good performance. It feels like distinctive to other superheroes, and I think the general concept for the character is good. And unfortunately, I just couldn't find that much to like past this. The main criticism I would have about this movie is honestly, it just doesn't really feel like a Supergirl movie. One thing I really appreciate about the Superman movie is that movie was so focused on exploring like who Superman is, what his philosophy is, and how that fits into like the modern day. And you have characters like criticizing his overly optimistic view on humanity. You have people saying that his kind of peaceful, good for the sake of good approach doesn't fit into the modern world. But with Supergirl, what I feel like you have is this kind of stock template of a superhero movie that you could just slot any superhero into. So the plot begins with this brigand villain landing on this planet and kind of just murdering this little girl's family and stealing their like precious swords. The little girl then swears revenge, and that is where she, in trying to find someone to help her kill this brigand, stumbles upon Supergirl in this like bar full of people. And Supergirl is like, she's sort of messy and drunken, and she doesn't want to take on this responsibility, and it's kind of that like reluctant apprentice mentor kind of relationship. And it's not like unfun. Like, I think the little girl who plays the little revenge girl is good, and I think Millie Alcock is actually really good as well. As you could very easily predict, a bunch of people online got angry that a woman is and just kind of have been harassing Millie Alcock to just such a ludicrous degree. They're talking about how like she's ugly and shouldn't be in this movie, and really like when you look at her, she's just a lady not wearing that much makeup, you know, like it's just such a fucking self-report to see people have this issue with her. So then later on they encounter Lobo, and Lobo is this pretty like interesting character in the DC universe. He's kind of this like biker, semi like rock star, insane bounty hunter from this other planet, and on power wise he's like about as strong as Superman, and he's really crazy. He wiped out his own planet. He's just this guy who tends to show up in DC storylines, and everyone is like, oh fuck, it's Lobo. And so like, you know, he is a fun character to introduce in this movie. But I kind of feel like one of the reasons Lobo is here is because the studio didn't have enough confidence in Supergirl herself as a character. But the problem is that becomes like this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, because one of the major criticisms I'd have with this movie is it just doesn't really feel like it knows what it wants to be. Like, you could take this movie and replace Supergirl with literally any other superhero, and the story wouldn't really have to change that much. Now, Supergirl does get like flashback sequences, and there are moments where like you see her life back on Krypton and like everything that kind of went wrong. But I think the problem for me is that she has this arc over the course of the movie where she's like partying and getting drunk and doing all this insane shit. And then towards the end of the movie, she kind of wants to settle down and move back to Metropolis with Superman and kind of try and make a life for herself there. My issue starts with the fact that the plot of the movie and that character progression don't really feel linked at all to me. Like, it kind of just feels like a bunch of crazy space shit happens, and then at some point, Supergirl just sort of has the epiphany that she wants to go back to Metropolis. Sometimes the story feels really focused on being about Supergirl and her character. Sometimes it feels really focused on like the apprentice storyline with this little girl. And then sometimes it kind of feels like it's meant to be this like sort of buddy cop movie with Lobo. And I feel like you could have focused on any one of those stories and you would probably have a pretty decent film. But the problem is it kind of focuses on all three, and what you get is sort of just fragments of different stories, all kind of like not melding together. Like, the narratives don't really inform each other. It doesn't really feel like they have any reason to exist side by side. And I just spent the entire movie kind of wondering why I should care. The villain especially just feels like a huge nothing burger. Now, in fairness, he does shoot Superdog early in the movie, and I will say, if a villain is going to shoot a dog, that's a really good way to make me root against them, but he's just so nothing. The only really like defining part of him is that he's part of this like all male race who like go from galaxy to galaxy, kidnapping women to, I guess, breed with. And it's like, okay, now we're now we're sort of doing something. Now we're like exploring Supergirl from this like more feminine perspective, and you know, maybe we can get into about like what it's like for the women who get kidnapped by this person, and like, you know, that whole angle of it, and existing under this like violent male race. Like, there's stuff to explore there from a kind of feminine perspective. The problem is the film just kind of puts the idea forward and then does like nothing with it. And that's kind of just what it feels like for a lot of this movie. Even like Lobo particularly. Like, I was kind of excited to see Lobo in the movie because like I like Lobo, and like Jason Momoa is like decent as him. They literally do nothing with the character. He doesn't have an arc. He doesn't even really have a story. He doesn't really have any reason to be there. He is just also angry with these brigand dudes, you know? And it's just, it feels like the most like just abject case of, hey, let's put one superhero in this movie so that maybe later we can make a different film about that superhero. And so it all just kind of mixes together in this mishmash of different plots that don't really feed into or inform each other in any kind of interesting way. And I hate to say it, but it does just make for a really forgettable movie. And that's the most damning thing I think I could say about this movie. I know I won't remember this in 2 years, and that's really disappointing because I felt like there was so much potential for Supergirl as a character, and especially when you looked at that Superman movie and the creativity and comedy that went into it, just none of that is here. Like, the film has a very goofy tone all the way throughout, but I don't know that like I ever laughed. You know, so much of the dialogue feels like a script. It feels like a script glued together from the cut up parts of other superhero movies. And yeah, it's a real shame because I think there was something that could have been really cool here. But I think ultimately it just feels like that the powers that be did not have the faith in this character to actually tell an interesting story. And I think it's really going to be to the film's detriment. This film has a budget of $170 million, and I really can't see word of mouth driving a lot of people to go see this movie, unfortunately, and I think it's probably going to bomb. But like, here's the thing. I hope I'm wrong there. I don't want that to be the case. I think the best case scenario for this movie is like maybe it resonates really hard with little girls and like there's a huge swell behind it. And if so, awesome. Because I think like, you know, a world where more female-led superheroes exist, it's not a bad one. Like, that could be cool. And there is precedent for that kind of thing like succeeding in the past. The original Wonder Woman movie was a massive success, huge. That made like $800 million. That made more at the box office than last year's Superman movie. So it can be done. I think you just have to have enough faith in the character and depict them in a good enough way. And unfortunately, I don't think that's what this film does. And so yeah, I am disappointed. I would have liked for this movie to be better, but it is not. Okay, till next time.